Housing inequality in Los Angeles unfairly affects the working class and immigrant communities living there due to the economic barriers. As housing costs continue to rise and gentrification progresses, many low-income families are being displaced. Coalitions and organizations like Eastside Leads and the Los Angeles Community Action Network are working hard to push against policies that value development over community and the heart of culture. To build an equal and fair city, we must have affordable housing available to everyone. In this video, we will explore the major factors contributing to the housing crisis, how different community groups are affected, and the potential solutions to address housing inequality. By the end, we want to answer the question, how can we make sure that housing is treated as a right, not a privilege? One major contributing factor to the housing crisis is social vulnerability. Eileen Diaz-McConnell's research and findings tell us that legal status, race, and income determine who can have access to affordable housing. Latino immigrants, specifically those without a legal status, are at higher risk of experiencing overcrowding and housing instability. Housing affordability is not a problem that affects all groups equally. Marginalized communities are denied access to stable housing because of discriminatory housing policies, rising rent prices, and a lack of affordable housing options. Those families who have fewer financial resources are forced to move into overcrowded and horrible living conditions. As this continues to happen, it creates a cycle which makes it difficult for families to find long-term housing stability. Miriam Greenberg et al. Discusses how the housing crisis forces people into areas that are at a higher environmental risk. As urban housing continues to become even more unaffordable, families are pushed into the wildland-urban interface, where they face the dangers of wildfires and other environmental hazards. The lack of affordable urban housing is not only a financial issue, but as well as a safety issue. When policymakers don't take the time to invest in affordable housing, they put working-class families in danger by forcing them to live in areas at risk to natural disasters. Addressing this issue means urban housing plans that take into consideration both affordability and safety. J. Revel Sims argues that gentrification is not the only reason people are getting displaced. Issues like city policies and new development projects all contribute to pushing low-income residents out. Buildings are being torn down, rents risen, and entire communities are being removed from where they built their lives. Gentrification drastically changes these neighborhoods at the cost of their residents. The increase of wealthy people leads to an increase in property cost, which might seem like a positive change, but it impacts those who have called these areas home for generations. Universities are also contributing to the ongoing issue of housing unaffordability. Yulia Gilich and Tony Boorman's research shows that the rising tuition costs and expensive campus housing pushes students into nearby neighborhoods, which in turn increases rent prices for both students and local residents. When students aren't able to afford on-campus housing, they fight for off-campus apartments, which drives up demand and cost. Over time, this negatively impacts long-term residents who can no longer afford to live in their communities. In order to address this issue, universities must provide affordable housing options for students so the residents in the surrounding areas are no longer affected. One of the organizations that are working to fight against housing inequality in Los Angeles is LA CAN. LA CAN is an organization that advocates for low-income and unhoused residents that focuses on rent control and making sure housing is a human right.
Is not enough shelter and there are not enough services to provide for houseless people. And the other thing that's most important, the only way that you end houselessness is to provide housing, right? And figuring out all the ways that we can, whether that's from city-owned properties, both raw land and buildings being converted. And when I say city, I mean city, county, state properties being converted to housing immediately. It means defunding the police and refunding the community with the resources needed to make us really safe, resources that really are geared toward health and food and employment and, of course, housing.
LA CAN plays an important role in the battle against housing displacement. By organizing protests, providing legal assistance, and holding policymakers accountable, they empower the residents of countless communities in order to change unjust housing policies. Their help has led to improved housing conditions in over 2,000 homes, which were previously in unlivable conditions, and 15,000 homes being preserved for low-income residents. LA CAN continues to push for stronger protections for tenants and unhoused individuals. Through their campaigns, they demand more affordable housing, improved living conditions, and an end to policies that criminalize the homeless. Their activism makes sure that people who are facing housing insecurity have a voice in local government decisions. LA CAN's advocacy has led to many policy changes that directly impact vulnerable communities. Their work proves that grassroots movements can create systemic change and challenge the structures that keep people in poverty. By continuing to fight for fair housing, they ensure that Los Angeles remains a place for everyone, not just the wealthy. Another important stakeholder in the fight for housing rights is Eastside Leads. This coalition is made up of community organizations that work to protect East Los Angeles from displacement by advocating for affordable housing policies that are shaped by the voices of the community.
Mi nombre es Juana Mena, tengo 26 años viviendo en California y aquí en la comunidad de Boyle Heights 10. Soy voluntaria de Eastside Leads porque estoy siendo afectada por el aburguesamiento que está habiendo en mi comunidad. Este plan del parque biotecnológico ya tiene años, porque esto sí se ve bien bonito, pero ¿a qué costo? A quedarse gente sin trabajo, gente sin vivienda y a ser desplazados. Eastside Leads están empoderando a la comunidad, están escuchando las necesidades que hay.
Eastside Leads focuses on preventing displacement before it occurs by pushing for policies that protect long-term residents from being bought out of their neighborhoods. Their work allows them to create a community where the residents are aware and informed of their rights. Rent control policies are made to cover all of East Los Angeles and allow everyone to join services and programs regardless of immigration status. Through their efforts, Eastside Leads fights to keep East LA affordable, making sure that those who built the community are not forced to leave. Eastside Leads also works on policy advocacy, community education, and direct action. By empowering residents, they make sure that housing policies reflect the needs of the community, rather than putting developers and corporations first. Their campaigns focus on preserving affordable housing and ensuring that new development projects include units accessible to local residents with lower incomes. Eastside Leads enables residents in the community to take control of their housing. Their work has successfully stopped harmful development projects and pushed for stronger tenant protections. By prioritizing the voices of the people most affected by the housing crisis, Eastside Leads proves that community-led collaborations and solutions are essential to creating change that lasts in Los Angeles. Housing instability isn't solely about numbers. It's about the real people, families, and the struggles. My family has felt the impact of rising rent prices, and so have thousands of other families throughout Los Angeles. This is a citywide issue that cannot be ignored. We've seen how low-income communities are affected, how gentrification and displacement can push out long-term residents, and how even students are struggling to find affordable housing. But we've also seen that change is possible. The fight for affordable housing is not over, and we all have a role to play in it. Whether it's supporting organizations like LA CAN and Eastside Leads, advocating for policy changes, or sharing our stories, every effort matters and can have an effect. As cities continue to develop, we have to think to ourselves, who benefits from these changes and whose voices are neglected? It's time to stop treating housing as a privilege and start treating it as what it really is, a basic human right.